Hey, everybody. Grant Miller here, Miami Community News. I'm with Mario Knapp.
Knapp, yes.
Knapp. You're running for sheriff. It's very exciting.
I am. First time in 60 years.
Yes, that's correct. First time in 60 years we're going to run elected official for a sheriff. I have my personal opinions on it. I still think it's a little confusing. You know, should the chief of the CEO, the mayor pick them? But the laws change. Right. So you're born in Miami.
Born in Miami, born in Jackson Hospital.
Okay, I'm going to give you these quiz.
Yeah.
Born in Jackson.
Yes.
You moved to New York for high school, elementary school.
For elementary school, at third grade, I did 3rd to 7th grade in New York, in Washington Heights.
Come back and you go to what school?
Ponce de Leon Junior High.
Who's your favorite teacher? I know you have one.
Well, so you know, in Ponce, I don't remember. I can absolutely tell you who my favorite high school teacher was.
Okay, you went to Gables High.
Yes.
Name him.
Mr. Dund. And actually changed my, I think, changed my route in life. By something he did.
What kind of teacher?
Science teacher.
Is he still alive?
You know, I don't know. I've been looking for him. I've been trying to find him. I've been trying to find him online. I want to say it was Philip Dunn, but I'm not sure.
Did he play football?
No.
Okay. Did you play any sports at Gables?
Did I? No.
Okay. And then from there, after you finished Gables, what did you do?
Finished Gables. I worked as a photographer at the Sears photo studio for like a year.
Which one? On 37th?
On 37th. Yeah.
There's a big zoning issue there now. About
I know. I look at it. It's kind of sad because it was so populated, and now it's like a ghost town there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Then from there, you went.
Then I worked at Midway Ford for a little while at the parts department, and became a police officer.
You were a county cop.
I was a county cop. Yes. Started in '94.
And how many years did you serve?
I like to say 27, but it was 26 years and 11 months. So just shy of a month.
That's important.
It is.
Okay, so your first day on the job, do you remember it?
I do.
Where were you stationed?
Well, so let's start by saying my first day on the job, and not the academy. I'm talking about the first day that I came came out.
The movie, like The Rookie. Okay.
Yes. And I'm going to fast forward, not even the FTO part, but my first day by myself. A buddy of mine, Mike Ramirez, we became best friends when we first started, and we didn't know what to do. We were in the same squad first day, and we just followed each other around for like 3 hours. We didn't know what to do. We were waiting for calls and followed each other around until we're like, okay, we gotta disconnect and do something, and we did.
So where part of town were you?
It was at the time called the Doral District, which is now known as the Midwest District.
Correct. Doral, as you know, is named after Dorothy and Al. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Dorothy and Al owned the resort on Miami Beach called Doral.
Okay.
They said, well, we're going to buy this big place out and build a thing out in this no man's land near the airport.
Right. So
Doral is named after Dorothy and Al. And then they bought that. And even when you were doing it 30 years ago, it was growing fast back then, wasn't it?
It was. I remember back then, after about 117th, there was nothing. There was nothing out there.
Not now.
No, now it's a whole world out there. Yeah.
All right, so you did that area. What was the first big thing that you did as a police officer? Did you arrest somebody? Did you give tickets? Were you on a scene? Something that you go, wow.
Well, I can tell you my first learning experience. And it was, the problem with police work, and I talked about this the other day, but it was influential for me. The problem with police work is when you go out on FTO,
FTO means
field training officer. So you get out of the academy and they put you with a field training officer, and they put you with 3 different ones, one on every shift. And the whole idea is you go out there and you kind of absorb each instructor's style of policing, and then you kind of make it your own, and it's showing you the ropes. And the very first one was a suicidal female that this was the first time I felt this small. Suicidal female. She had slit her wrists because she had broken up with her girlfriend. And
what part of town?
This was in Westchester. Yeah.
Westchester.
Westchester, yes. So, it was in that area, and we went there, and I didn't know what to do. Well, not that I didn't know.
And how old were you at that time?
Well, I had to be 21 years old.
21, 22. Seeing it first time you saw it to me dead.
No, she wasn't dead. It was the issue that I had actually was that you have to kind of mold yourself around what the FTO wants to see you do. And this FTO was always like a real tough guy. And so he finally says to me, we have to Baker Act her. She has slit her throat. Her wrist. And he said, we have to Baker act her. And I just went up to her, and I didn't know what to do. I had thought I had to be the macho cop, and I put my arms like this, and I said, let's go, you're coming with us, you know? And she started crying. And he then looked at me like I was, you know, like I had messed up, sat next to her, grabbed her by the shoulder and said, and called her by her name and said, hey, you know, it's time to go with us, you know, that kind of thing. And I literally felt that small because I thought he wanted to see like the tough thing. And I didn't know
How would
to
you
act.
know?
I was
You're 21
years old. I was 21 years old. Yeah. But yeah,
Things like that change your life.
they do.
As a cop, people, to me, people don't realize somebody go to war, somebody who, as a police officer, you're going to war. You don't know if somebody's going to shoot at you.
Right.
You shoot somebody, it's scary, and you learn and have a lesson every day, and it's pretty emotional. So that was a learning lesson for you.
It taught me to communicate, you know, and that it's not all about the uniform and the badge. It's sometimes just let people save face, you know, and that's one of the things I learned early on. Just let them save face.
I think now you guys, the police, have somebody on suicides or domestic. You bring somebody else other than a cop to some of these scenes, correct?
Yeah, that's kind of moving around nationally. We're trying something different. You know, remember, police is not always the best population to deal with every issue, right? And we have been for years. And so we've noticed, you know, throughout the years and looking at situations throughout the country that we're not always the best suited for all the situations. And so it's kind of an experiment. It looks like it's working in some places. It's not really working out in others because it's hard to keep that staff, you know. And part of the, you know, there's a few challenges with the system.
With mental illness. We're talking about mental illness right now.
Well, with the concept of bringing a service provider to every call. And
it's dangerous.
It is. Not only is it dangerous, it's really hard to categorize. Remember, a lot of calls that we get, you're going to a call that's described in a certain way, but when you get there, it's something different. And so there goes the idea that if it's not categorized as a mental illness call, you don't have that service provider with you. So again, we're back to square one. So there's got to be some, you know, tapping things into place and adjustments because it's not, you know, one system doesn't work everywhere.
Right. So as a rookie, you were 20 some odd years. Tell me your steps that make you qualified to be sheriff of Dade County.
Yes. So I did the uniform patrol, and then I went to the HUD unit, Housing and Urban Development, which is under police operations.
Where? What part of town?
Miami-Dade. So there's two HUD units. There's HUD North and HUD South. And back then we worked with the projects. And basically what we had was we had an apartment inside of two of the projects in Northside. One was in Larchmont and one was in the Annie Coleman Apartments.
Right.
And
Southside?
Northside District.
What was Southside? You worked Northside.
I worked North, right? South, I think it was Naranja and Perrine.
Right.
And basically our station was an apartment within the projects.
Right. I seen them. I think if worked, it's unbelievable. I don't know if it worked then.
Believe it or not, it did. I mean, remember, back then I was a young cop. I wanted to be out there, you know, arresting people, doing what I thought police work was. And then you learn really quickly that police work is actually going out, talking to people, you know, building relationships and having them knock on the door, having them trust you enough to knock on the door and say, you know, my husband is this, my wife is that, you know.
You know, I'm going to change the subject for a second. A big O, Arthur Wellings. Do you know Arthur Wellings? He ran the program for, it was funded, and he worked with youth programs throughout Dade County. And now I forgot what it was called. Jim DiBernardo was in charge of it. But it was great. The cops got paid, not to be on the street, but to be in youth programs.
Right.
And the funding fell through a couple of years ago. I'll remember the name of it. But I think that the new generation shouldn't be scared of cops. They should think these are our friends. And that's a challenge when you were on the streets back then. That was in the 90s.
Right.
So it wasn't set that way, was it?
Right. No, 90s was a very, what we'll call a proactive area. So back then we were out there like really working and you know, banging the trees to get the criminals to fall off the tree, if that makes sense, right? Now I think we've learned that probably wasn't the best use of resources. It's not to say that we shouldn't do proactive work. In fact, we need to go back to proactive work, but we need to be a little more precise on how we do it.
So, okay, so you went from HUD, and then what did you do from there?
From there, I went to our special response team, to the SWAT team, and I was there for 5 years.
The SWAT team, are you I get confused. When are they regular cops, or they just sit around until there's an issue?
Yeah, so most SWAT teams in the country are not full-time. They're what we call part-time teams. And so they have all different kinds of responsibilities within an agency. Could be anything, detectives, uniform, that kind of thing. And when a SWAT operation occurs, then they have to get dressed like Superman, and put on their uniform.
So, were you a street cop then?
Well, I was in HUD, then I transferred over to SWAT. We were, at the time, one of maybe 6 police departments.
But what did you do all day
full-time.
when you weren't doing SWAT?
You were always doing SWAT, because you were either training, you were working out, you were shooting, you were always, or search warrants. High-risk search warrants were our predominant work flow pretty much every day.
All right, so
we averaged about 1 warrant a day back then.
And that's dangerous, because you don't know if they're friends.
Yeah, it's highly volatile. It's what we call high-risk search warrants. So anything with drugs has a nexus to guns. The moment, if you remember in the 80s, every drug dealer is armed, right? And so the way because you can do an arrest warrant or you could do a search warrant, that's not necessarily considered high risk. But the moment you put drugs as a nexus to it, now it becomes a high-risk search warrant. And that comes from the 80s, what we learned with the...
All right, so from SWAT, and then you did what?
After SWAT, I knew I was getting promoted, so I wanted to get off the pager for a month, because I knew I'd end up on midnights. And, the least senior sergeant always ends up where they end up. So I figured it'd be a midnight. So I went to the training bureau as a defensive tactics instructor and was there for on or about 6 months, and then got promoted to sergeant.
Then what?
Then I worked uniform patrol in Kendall as a supervisor. And I think every sergeant, every lieutenant, everybody that gets promoted should go back to uniform patrol.
To understand what's happening.
Of course. I mean, you're not really a sergeant unless you've been a sergeant in uniform, right? Specialized unit, anybody can be a supervisor there. And I think the same goes for lieutenant. And so I did that, and then I got called to the tactical narcotics team. And I ended up at TNT and did that for about a year also, till I got called back to the training bureau, where I started my career as the subject matter expert in use of force for Miami-Dade County. And I started doing that, my timelines are bad, but it was in 2003-ish, around there.
When did you retire?
My last 30 days were at the Surfside building collapse, August 3rd of 21.
Wow. Fire chief, you know who he is?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Family ran the market next to us.
Really?
So I watched him grow up from the age of 6 to what he is today.
It's crazy. Huh?
And it's like, he's not my child.
Mm-hmm.
His father's name was Joe.
Right.
But watching him from being in the store right here to what he is today, it's very exciting. Every time I see him, I get emotional because,
especially when you see him on the news, and it is exciting.
So, all right. So that was your last thing. Okay, we got 17 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about all the things you've done.
Mm-hmm.
How does that make you the best qualified to be the sheriff?
Right.
And what is the sheriff really going to do?
Right.
Because it's different now. The director of safety operations, there's a money issue, and they're not in charge of it. The county is.
Right.
And if you become sheriff, or when or if you become sheriff, you have to ask the county for the money, and the county doesn't do it, you go to the governor.
Right.
And it's touchy, because if the sheriff controls the money, the mayor and the CEO is not as strong, and the sheriff is very strong.
Right.
Correct? Because you have the money.
I think in theory, yes, you're right.
In theory. Doesn't mean it happens. All right, so tell me why you think you're best qualified.
So let me go back to a few other things that I did in between.
Okay.
And that is that I've been writing policy ever since I was a sergeant. So for 18 years, I was writing policy. Now, the reason why that's significant, and the reason why I want to differentiate that from any other policy, is that, generally speaking, a sergeant won't be writing policy for anything other than maybe a squad, maybe administrative rules or anything like that. I was writing policy, global policy, for the entire department.
When you say global, not just Miami-Dade County.
No. What I mean is not just for a squad, not just for a unit, not just for a district, but for the entire department, right? And it was in the most litigious area of law enforcement, which is use of force. So that's to say that not only was I developing the curriculums, training the officers, writing the policy, constantly looking at a case-by-case basis and making adjustments to that policy, I would have to defend that policy
In court?
in court if somebody did something wrong or it was perceived to look wrong and that kind of thing. That's what you do as a subject matter expert. So I wrote a lot of professional opinions, not just to the county attorney's office during cases, but also either on the stand, to internal affairs, to the director. I had a relationship with Bobby Parker and Jim Loftus to where if I wanted,
And who are they?
those were former directors of the
Okay.
police department.
Not everybody knows that.
Yeah. And Barbie Parker is one of those guys that I would run into a burning building for because we had a pretty good relationship. And again, I was just a sergeant at the time. But if I wanted to hear his opinion on use of force, I gave it to him. He was an adult. He was a real executive in the sense that he would ask me, come into the office, here's the challenge. What's your opinion? What are they going to hit me on? What are the challenges? What's your opinion on this? And 80% of the time, he went with what I said, and 20% of the time, like an executive would, he made a responsible decision based on his experience. And so I learned a lot from him. But I say that because there's not a lot of people that I would say, even if you look at the department, even at high, even above management levels, but upper echelon, people that don't have that experience. I also wrote all the mass casualty attack. In fact, I independently chaired, meaning that I was never told to do it, but during the Parkland shooting, we were actually sitting down redeveloping all of our active shooter protocols. I ended up
at the same time?
at the same time because I had recognized at the time that we were deficient. Law enforcement in general was deficient in what an active shooter response should be. And so I grabbed the most argumentative people that I know that have experience in different areas and brought them in the room, and we sat there for about a month.
Just
putting
right
together-
after.
No, this was before. This was before Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, because one of the things I would say all the time is it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. And so we put together what I feel is a national model that should be followed. It was the first time we put something together where it wasn't, the logo on the policy isn't Miami-Dade Police. It was Miami-Dade County, because we brought in a fire chief, we brought in dispatchers, we brought in a few people, because that event is so gargantuan in scope that we needed all those people to have input on this policy, and we did it in 30 days. And it's what I think right now should be a national policy.
Okay, so things you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to make you qualified to be sheriff? And what's the difference between a director of safety, other than the election?
Right.
What's the director of safety and what's going to the sheriff? What is the difference? Is there a difference?
Right. Well, I think the biggest glaring difference is that, and that's the reason for the election, right? And that was because the electorate wanted the next police, let's call it, what do you call it, chief, sheriff, director, whatever, the head of the agency,
Right.
to be totally free and independent of any political influence. And that's the main thing that...
There's only a few counties in Florida that don't have that, and we're one of them that we're working.
Well, we're actually the only one. There are 67 counties in the state of Florida. All 67 have historically had a duly elected sheriff, up to and including us. Up to about, I think it's 1967, grand jury indictments. We had a corrupt sheriff here, Buchanan. He ended up getting indicted, went to jail, and then it was determined that it was so systemic within the department that they couldn't risk having an undetected person run for sheriff, backed by whoever was behind
Right.
all of this. And so they had to bring someone from the outside. And that's how we ended up in this structure. And that structure stayed intact through the 70s, 80s, 90s, when I come on, the 2000s, and then eventually in 2018, I think it was when it went to vote and...
To the people.
Right.
So when you get elected, or if you get elected, when? Your first 100 days.
Right.
Get elected in November, you take over probably in January. First 100 days, what are you going to do?
So I've been gone from the department for 2 years.
What have you been doing the last couple of years?
So I initially left. I got an offer into private industry that just made sense to take at the time. It would have been irresponsible for me not to take because the timing was such that
Right.
it would have been a bad decision not to take it, and so I did. And then I ended up disconnecting from there, and but I've continued to do police consulting in the area of use of force.
Wait, 100 days, January. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, the first thing we need to do is reevaluate the entire department. If you look at, so let me go back. I feel that what was happening in the department when I was there, I think there's a lot of resources that we can kind of restructure. You know, I think the biggest priority for Miami-Dade County and the residents here is that we need to be able to have more uniform patrol. I mean, if my kid, my 16-year-old calls the police, I want the police there faster, right? And so I think we need to restructure, kind of reevaluate units. I'm the kind of person that likes to measure twice and cut once. So we need to see what kind of responses we're having in different places, right? And reevaluate that. We need to reevaluate assignments, you know, within the command staff itself. I don't like the fact that our internal affairs section, or, you know, PCB or internal affairs, does not report directly to the director, and it should.
Who does it report to?
I think right now, well, now things changed because I know that AD Daniels was just promoted. I'm sorry, Deputy Director Daniels was just promoted to interim director. So I don't know if she's restructured that, but I do think that if you look around the country, the standard in the industry is that internal affairs reports directly to the director, and it makes sense because there's so many sensitive cases and such sensitive information that it should be viewed really only by the director, and the director should have direct knowledge of everything that happens in the department. So while a lot of people talk about, like you mentioned earlier, that the mayor loses power, I don't see this position as a power grab. I see it as a grab of...
I don't. When I say power, the money is power.
It is. I get you. But my view on it is, I'm not trying to gain more power than is necessary to provide safety to the public. At the end of the day, that's my only concern. You know, I think that whoever becomes sheriff, obviously, needs to work together with the county commission, needs to work with the mayor, no matter who it is, because at the end of the day, it's the Miami-Dade public that, independent of Republican, Democrat, because they've made it a partisan race, independent of any of that, every single person, white, blue, green, yellow, deserves to feel safe.
That's correct.
Yes.
You know, that's the biggest issue we have in Dade County. Do we feel safe?
Right.
And I think majority of people feel pretty safe. I go all over through Dade County. I feel pretty safe everywhere you go. I was at an area last Friday, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I know people that wouldn't be there.
Right.
And so Miami is getting safer. I think we're educating people. So what are you going to do? The election's a year and a half away. No, year and a month away.
Yeah.
Right? 13, 14 months away. How are you going to get your name out? What are you going to do different?
Same thing we're doing here, I'm willing to do in every group, every community, every home association, everybody. I very purposely am not doing anything right now, but I hate to say campaigning, because while this is a political position and we have to run a political campaign, I don't see this as politics. I see this as communication. I see this as getting out in front of people and letting them know who I am, you know, and knowing what it is that I plan to do for the department and for the community. And so my goal is to meet with anyone who's willing to listen and just get them to see, like I said, who I am and what I plan to do.
I think you hit it on the head. It's not how much money whoever has to run a big campaign. I think people want to know, they want to be able to touch the sheriff and go, okay, he's one of us. He feels comfortable. He understands what we need. And that's a challenge. And so you got 13 months to meet, 2.7 million people.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I find it interesting. I wish that I can run this entire campaign with zero money, because I feel, and especially as a law enforcement guy, I feel that the more money you receive, the more there's that perception that you owe someone something, right? And so I'd rather receive $1 from 1 million people than to receive $1 million from one.
Right.
Make sense? But I will tell the cameras, no, we need money because campaigns cost, and so we need the support. But I'd rather have support from the individual residents and have support from them than from.
What part of town do you live in now?
Right now, I live by the zoo. Yeah.
Okay.
By Countrywalk.
Right. So You got the experience. You climbed the ladder. Do you feel like you climbed the ladder in Miami-Dade Police Department?
Yes, definitely. And I'm really proud of the way I climbed the ladder because I never skipped a rank. There was no appointment. As a matter of fact, if you look at my career path, I'm pretty well rooted in every single rank. There is no rank that I was there for a year and left. You know, I was a lieutenant for, my timelines are really bad. I can't tell you the year that I got promoted. I'm really bad with those. But I can tell you that I was a lieutenant, I want to say, for about 8 years. I was a captain for honor about 5 years, you know. So I'm well rooted in every rank. I didn't just cruise by on my career. And every single assignment that I've ever had, I did not interview for except for one. So in other words, I've only interviewed for one assignment, not promotion, but one assignment in 27 years. And that's for the SWAT team. Everything else I was picked up and told where to go.
What is retirement for police? In 35?
No, you can do 25, and then you have the option to go into the drop. You're eligible to retire at 25. That doesn't mean you would.
And you retired at 27.
27.
In 11 months.
Well, 26
and 11 months. Yeah. Why didn't you last longer? Was it time?
It was a timing issue. I had no intention of retiring. In fact, I was really happy. I had the Special Patrol Bureau, which means I supervised. I had under my command the SWAT team, the bomb squad, the aviation unit, Marine Patrol, K-9 motors, incident management team, which is why I was at the building collapse, Special Patrol, which handles all the major, special events, which handles all special events, all the Marlin games, all the football games, the F1 when they're
Super
here,
Bowl.
Super Bowl when they're here, youth, all those things. So I had, to put things in context, every other major has one captain reporting to them. I had 3 captains reporting to me. I was really happy. But I did get an offer from the outside that just made sense to me at the time. I believed in the person hiring me. We have a good history. I believed in him. I like to say he's like the Steve Jobs of that industry, and so I went.
Right. Well, we wish you best of luck. Election's 13 months away.
Yes.
And Mario Knapp, pronounce it?
Knapp,
Knapp.
yes.
Everybody, Grant Miller here, Mario Knapp. Have a great day.